Good morning. I'm Beis, volume 2. So we're on top of page 1198. I was thinking about our conversation yesterday, which was all around Re'iyah, seeing or envisioning, experiencing the Sumar Menechem Ru'u Mibara Eila, Ru'u. And as we shall see in a moment, he's going to begin the language he's going to say, as we pointed out yesterday, Riyas Ene Basar Mamish. And we went back and forth what the Riyah exactly means. I actually looked in also some of the other Mamorim on the topic. So I wanted to just sum up very briefly, without going into the whole thing. Few points. So first of all, as I don't know if Eliezer is on the line here. But regardless, the question when you say Riyah, you could say that there's Riyas Einei HaSeichel, Chacham Einav Bereisheh. So there's an expression I saw in Maimer in Tafrei Samach, Samchuni, Tafrei Samach. Just to read the language, he uses these words when he comes to Sumar Menechem. He says, it's a level of comprehension as if he's seeing it. That a person has to always see, looking at creation, to see who created this. And he explains clearly, it doesn't mean you know the personality of who created it, but you know there's something that created it, something that is sustaining it. But he does say, then he goes on and says another language. He says these words that which appeared to me different than what we're learning here a bit. I'll explain in a moment. It says like this. He says, so you can come to know in a way of seeing, like actually seeing something by recognizing the creative force within it. And he says exactly the example I gave yesterday, that you know there's a soul inside of you even if you don't see the soul. And you know it clearly because there would be no life if there was no soul. So then he says, "Vayidehis bonanus, ba'mokas adas yochel leidu lahargish mamishes mitziyusei, v'gam yochel liz b'chinas riyah mamish be'ayin haseichel, ba'ayin haseichel." You can actually have actual seeing with the eye of the mind. U'kamaymer ezu chacham hareyas haneled, like the wise person who sees the birthing, that which gives birth. So you could go with that approach, but when you look in the Maimer in Sumar Menechem, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, that I mentioned, Tov Kuf Samach Gimel, and the Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer in Tov Kuf Tzadik Gimel. It's posted. Thank you for posting it on the group, the whole Maimer. And then this Maimer, which is based on it, that we're learning now in Ayin Beis, it seems stronger than that. He says there clearly, not here, but he says there, the Novi is making an attempt to show them with their eyes the creative force. So when the Novi says, Sumar Menechem Yeshaya, HaNovi, so that's the language. I just want to read that inside. Where's that? What page in Shiur Hashirim? I have the Shiur Hashirim. Yeah, here we are. I just want to read the language here. Because here he's speaking about Chelas Ava. And he therefore wants to say that Riyah causes it. So he says words like this. Let me get the exact expression. The He wants them to have a sense of riyah in it. So you can still argue that he also means here an understanding that is as if you see it, as opposed to an understanding where it's still from a distance and you don't like see it. But he's going to use the expression, as I said, riyas ene basar mamish. That's why I emphasized yesterday that there's an element of seeing that perhaps is more than just understanding, because it's like, yes, you don't see the subatomic particle, you don't see the electricity, but it's so clear to your eyes that you don't need to see it the same way physically, because you see its impact and you see its expression. Light from the bulb is not possible without electricity. So electricity doesn't have a shape and form that our eye can see, at least not the naked eye, without any other instruments. So you see the light, that you're seeing it with your own eyes. You're not, someone told you there's electricity, that you see the light with your own eyes. You see a world, you see a sun and moon, you see stars, you see a stone flying. So you don't see necessarily the energy in the stone, but the flying is a form of energy. It's not a stationary entity. So in that sense, you could see it's more than just with your seichel. It's a riyas ba'ene basar mamish. So I just wanted to say that. I wanted to say one more thing. I don't know, again, if Rabbi Lezer is here, but I, with all respect, I wanted to say something that's a little sensitive. But Rabbi Lezer Gold came out of COVID miraculously. I wanted to ask him, when he sees his own health right now recovering, is this be'ene basar or be'ene seichel? When he sees the miracles that happen in his life, since it happened to him, I would want to know, does he see it with flesh and blood, or he sees it like he contemplates on it? I would guess that he would answer it's ene basar. It's not just you contemplate on a miracle that happened to you and you have to figure it out, but you see it 24/7 in the way you breathe, in the way you walk and talk, where at a point you weren't walking and talking. So is it ene basar, like as if you see this table? But in many ways it is. In many ways it's even deeper than that. So I just wanted to just sum that up a little in our conversation here. That, and clearly he says this riyah, because there's that visualization of it, however you explain it, it's more than just understanding it. That's why when you contemplate on that, because here in the Maimer, in the Maimer I just read before, Samchuni Tov Reish Samach, he says through contemplation you can come to actually seeing it, at least like seeing it. Here he says you see it. He says clearly, Ein of Royas and Loy Taz Be'ena. It's not fulfill us. That's why when you're miyamik of his brain, and then he says when you delve into it and you contemplate, that's when and you recognize that the whole world is nullified before God. That's when you come to a point of pining, yearning, longing, and aching for it to be encompassed, because you recognize you come to that state of deep ache. That what you see it on one hand, you see an existing energy that is energizing and creating and sustaining existence. And there's no way you could understand it. So it's like seeing it, but you can't fully contain it, or you can't contain it at all. If you weren't shown, I never saw it, so fine, you know what? It's a matter of faith or belief or understanding. But since I saw it, you showed it to me, and telling me now I can't contain it, that creates the chelas ava. Okay, that love sickness that we've been discussing, that the neshama experiences in wanting to cleave with and connect with the divine. So that's what I wanted to just add into the equation. I'm ready to continue on in the paragraph on page 1198. But if anybody wants to weigh in, ask anything, or say something, by all means, and then we shall continue.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, because I've been thinking about it a lot, and a couple guys from the Shiur
So with that said,
spoke to me.
Now that you have the Maimer of Eira Teira, as I mentioned, the Eira Teira, the Tzemach Tzedek, is printed two places. I believe on the Ayin Beis group, he posted the version printed in Pesach Maimarim. Is that correct? That's what I think I saw you do. Let me see. Pesach? Yeah, Drushim the Pesach. Okay.
Yeah,
I
that's
happen to be
correct.
looking at the Maimer Shirim because it's actually a better Ksav Yad, but doesn't matter. Practically speaking, it's exactly the same Maimer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have, it's
why am
not
I
the whole
mentioning it
mimer
again?
there.
Because yesterday we compared the previous paragraph that we learned on top of page 1198 was almost word for word from the Eirater of the Tzemach Tzedek. The same is now continuing on. What we're going to learn now is essentially in the mimer that I'm looking at. It's page where is it? Page 220. If you want to look on the pages that he posted here, that Matis posted, I'll tell you what page it is. Just give me a minute. Oh, I can't figure it out. 1 second. Oh, actually, it didn't post it later. Okay.
I can't post it now, so.
Yeah, it's later. I don't think you posted those pages. Sorry. Okay. I'll compare it to the Eirater after we learn it inside here. So now he says like this, Vihine.
He's saying
I'm starting
something.
in the paragraph, the new paragraph
Amen.
on page 1198. It's all posted on ayinbeis.com now.
In this mimer,
Want to follow along. Vihine kol zeh b'riyas einei basar mamish.
this
Everything
mimer,
we said here, in the last page, about seeing, is be'enei basar mamish, literally with our eyes of flesh. Which brings me back to why I'm insisting that there's something more here than just Ayin Seichel. Because if it's Einai Seichel, you could say it's like seeing it actually with your own eyes. It's as real for you as if you saw it with your own eyes. But to actually say Einai Basar, not just Einai Basar, but Einai Basar Mamish, tells me wants to make a point that we're looking at the Olam Hazeh, we're looking at the world and creation, and with our own eyes of flesh, we're seeing the divine energy. Obviously, people have bechira and free will, as we discussed. They could choose not to see anything, or they could choose to dismiss it, or explain it in different ways. Look, science uses the word nature often, the miracle of nature. You could say they're just replacing the miracle of nature, that they see the miracle of nature in existence and replace the word nature with God, and they're also seeing something. They just call it a different name. So it's not a question of there is something that we are actually experiencing, and not just the surface level of it. We're experiencing the full experience of life is more than just the surface level of physicality. It includes the energy that's energizing the physical universe and sustaining it, whether you call it divine or not. We are calling it divine because that's the emes. But there's something more. Life is not just, when someone says, I see the seasons changing, it was mentioned the other day. We're now going here in this part of the world, we're moving from winter to spring, and then we'll be moving to summer. I see the season changing. What are you seeing exactly? You're seeing, yes, you're seeing the trees beginning to sprout leaves, the weather is feeling warmer, other things that are indicative of a change of season. When it comes down to it, you don't see the change, you just see its impact. You see that something must be going on. Now, science will explain why these things are happening, the orbit of the earth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we use the word seeing all the time, even on things that are not purely like I'm just seeing my hand. Am I seeing a hand, or I'm also seeing the movement of my hand, which tells me that there's nerves, and there's muscles, and there's bone and skeleton, and there's skin, and there's blood vessels. So he's using the word b'riyas einei basar mamash. What he's now going to address is an interesting and deeper point. Can you also see, with that same visualization, things that are beyond us? That's the question now. Because remember yesterday, and that's why I read it, if you remember that whole piece of Riyah and Shmiya, the Tzemach Tzedek, which this Maimer is based on, said, Shmiya, you can hear and understand things that are far beyond you that you can't see. Because Shmiya is not actually experiencing, it's hearing about it. You're hearing the story. So Chacham Odaf Menovi, a Chacham can see farther than a prophet. I should qualify, not see. He could understand farther than a prophet. A prophet could only experience what he sees. So for example, my eyes, I can see right now out my window, let's say I could see a mile, just for argument's sake. After a mile, my eyes, no matter how good my eyes are, without any instruments, I can't see further. But I know in my mind, there's more than a mile. I've traveled to the city. I traveled 3 miles away, 5 miles away. So essentially, Shmiya, hearing about it or knowing it exists beyond sight, can be in areas that are far beyond us, which is the mile of Shmiya Take. It allows you to experience things that you are not yet able to visualize. So if you remember, he said, therefore, Yechudei Allah, which is the yichud that happens, let's call it, in the world of, he says, the world of Atzilus and higher, the bitl of the Esesphiris, we don't see that, but we can understand it. We're told. What we see is the physical world, the sun, the moon, the earth. We see its existence, the creation, yesh ma'ayin, and its sustaining functionality, as we've learned, that it continues to be consistent, perpetual, and so on. That we see. And from there, through that, we see the koyach Ein Sof, the power of godliness in it, as I explained. But when you talk about Atzilus, there's nothing you see. There's nothing to say, oh, I see with my eyes. I'm reading about it. I'm told about it. So it's actually a higher yichud and a much higher bitl. Bitl b'mitzias is much deeper and higher than bitl hayesh. In other words, the ayin of the yesh hanivra, in the language of the Maimorim here, is lower than the ayin of the yesh amiti. But the ayin of the yesh hanivra we can relate to, because we see it all the time. We see its effect on us all the time. So now he's going to be wondering, based on that, so the Tzemach Tzedek says, so there's riyah in the lower bitl, in the bitl in the, as basically calls here, das tachten, or the ayin of the yesh hanivra, or the oir hagvul, that manifests in existence. So it's a lower bitl, but it's one that we can directly experience. Ru'u mi bara ela, and therefore causes us a chelas ava, because we're yearning for more. Now that I see that energy of that divine energy, I want it, and I can't have it. Like you said, there's no way we can contain it completely. That's why we're ill and sick and longing and aching for it. Whereas Yichudei Allah is a higher bitl, but I'm not aching because I don't see. And when you don't see, it doesn't have quite the same effect. Like he said, when you contemplate on it, actually the contemplation itself is somewhat fulfilling. He said on the top of page 1197. So now he wants to address, can there be riyah or some form of riyah in Yichudei Allah? Now it's interesting, when you don't look at the Maimer and Tzemach Tzedek, you don't necessarily see all the context, but the Rebbe Rashab obviously took it from the Maimer and he only took what he wanted to bring. He doesn't cite everything. That whole piece about the difference in Yichudei Tato and Yichudei Allah that I read, what I summarized yesterday, is not cited here. Here he jumps right away to the next level, and the Tzemach Tzedek says exactly this language. Let me just read it from the Tzemach Tzedek. He said, "V'chinei chol anal." Tzemach Tzedek now. Nizbar Peter Sumarim Vero Hainu B'riyah Einei Basar Mamish. He used exactly the same language. Actually seeing it with the eyes of flesh. Which is the next line now. Let's continue in Ayin Beis. Word for word from the Tzemach Tzedek. So now, even Yechudei Allah, which till now we understand it as Shmiya, as something you hear about, you understand, you can contemplate. It's a far greater bittul, but it's only to us. It's not as real like seeing it because it's not as close to us. He says that be'emes, there's an element of riyah. So now he's going to remember, because we're explaining how Eish Hey is yearning, Chelas Ava has a love sickness to connect to Eish Yud. Eish Hey was what? Eish Shchera, the Eir HaGvul, wanting and pining and longing and aching to connect to the Eir HaBligvul and to the Eir that's higher than Sev V'mal. Till now, in this last paragraph, we learned Chelas Ava is the fact that since we see the divine power in existence, so we want to connect with it. But now he's going further, he's going to say there's a riyah that we have even in the Yichudei Allah, which of course is a big chiddush, and we have to understand what that means. So we're going to learn that now. That's what we're going to be learning. But there's a parenthesis that the Rebbe Rashab adds, that's not an Eirater, that's not Tzemach Tzedek, which is the Rebbe Rashab's addition to help us understand this. Before I read the parentheses, I want to make sure that the point I made, what we're going to learn now, is clear. If not, please ask. If yes, I'll just continue with the parentheses. Okay. So he says now like this. I just should mention, which is always good to mention. You see here how the Rebbe Rashab is bending over backwards. I mean, I don't want to use that word, so it's maybe not respectful, but how he's going to the farthest lengths to make that interface as close as possible. Because you could say, you know, what's wrong with having a Chelas Ava Riyah till now? What do we now need to push? Tzemach Tzedek, of course, is making the point, but the Rebbe Rashab is continuing it here, that the Riyah he wants even is in the higher levels. He wants us to have as much experience of the divine and as close experience as possible. You just see that in the way the ideas develop here, as we grow, as he constantly never suffices, you know, that's enough and let's move on. No, let's now go to the next level of Riyah. So here's now what he says in the parentheses. The Riyah Hanal, the Su'u Modim Einechem, the visual or the seeing, the sight that we talked about earlier in Su'u Modim Einechem, V'ru'u mibara Eila, raise your eyes to heaven. Hu sha'ideher Eila merayim b'chinas ein sof. What was the discussion? That through the world, through existence, we see the level of Ein Sof. You know what I just thought? That this parenthesis is probably coming to help us without citing that whole paragraph from the Tzemach Tzedek. The Rebbe Rashab is somewhat summarizing it himself. That's what I think this parenthesis is. Okay, so through the world, because he spoke about the world, creation of the world, the very existence of a yesh tells you that something created it, because it couldn't create it itself, like you said. That the koyach, what was the expression he had? Koyach Ein Sof. Because nothing humans cannot, nothing in this material world can creates. It's all ill of all, cause and effect. And here's the creation. And from the hasmada, the continuation, that existence is sustained, and its functionality that we see is also continuous. So from the Welt, from the world, we learn, we see, we visualize, we discern Ein Sof as we've discussed. So what do we know from this? Oh no, start. Misstated. Now he's saying, that's from the world. Now he's saying, and similarly, can you have Riyah in godliness, in the divine infinite, without the world? We are living in this world. So we see a world all the time. And through it, we come to understand, we come to see Koyach Ein Sof. Is it possible to see Ein Sof from Ein Sof itself? So he's saying, yes. What the Maimer is saying here is, yes, you could have a Riyah and Ein Sof B'tzaratzmai, not related to the world, and also in that which is higher than Geder Elemus, that which is higher than the realm of existence of the worlds. which of course needs much explanation. What does that mean? What does that even mean? Riyah, that we should have a riyah there. We could have an understanding. We could have shmiyah. We could hear about it. But he continues, the visualization or the seeing of Ein Sof on its own, not as it relates to it. He keeps saying two things. Let me explain why. Because the first thing is that we're seeing in the world, Sumar Menechem, he said, you're looking at Marem, Sumarem, you're looking at heaven, you're looking at existence, and from it, you find the Bara Ela, who created all of this. So you have something to hold on to, and from that, you're seeing the Koyach Ein Sof. But what about the Ein Sof itself if you don't have what the existence itself? Can you see the electricity without the light bulb, so to speak? So he says yes. But then even furthermore, not just electricity without the light bulb, can you see the levels of the divine energy that are higher than the light bulb in the first place, that are higher than existence? Or to use the analogy I always use, can you see the artist without the art? Can you see the artist, how he is beyond being an artist? And on both these things, he says, yes, you can. And that he calls, so and that which is higher than the existence and the world, that's yichudei law, because you're not talking about tata. You're not looking about a yichud, havaya lakim, through existence, or the ayin within existence. You're talking now yichudei law. You're talking how it is in the divine itself, how higher levels of divine are unified with even higher levels. That is called yichudei law. And the chiddush now is that there could be riyah in those levels as well. Ube'emes, says this Rebbe Rashab, and in truth, zeu b'chinas gilui me'ein sei baruch hu. He's now going to say something, again, another twist, which turns things over and makes things more complicated. But the fact is, he's saying now that the truth is, yichudei law is only giluyim of Ein Sof. Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Because it's not the Atzmus. When a person contemplates on Yichudei law and then comes to the level of Riyah, whatever that means, which we'll learn about, that's Giluyim. That's the revelations of the divine. Yes, revelations that are beyond us. And you don't have a light bulb, you don't have an existence to hold on to. Because you're talking about the Ein Sof itself, or that which is higher than the worlds. But at the end of the day, it's Giluyim. And that which we see, the power of Ein Sof that creates existence, is actually higher than Ein Sof in Yichudei law, because it's coming from Asmus, because only Asmus can create. Like he says earlier, we learned from the Geras HaKesh, to create Atzilus, you don't need Atzmus. Giluyim can create Giluyim. I mean, everything has to come from Atzmus, but it doesn't indicate that you must have something that's pure Atzmus, that has no ilu v'siba acheres, that has no cause. B'tzusim Atzmusei. Whereas, if you remember, when he spoke about Ein Arech L'cha B'Elam Hazeh, only Elam Hazeh teaches us about the divine that's beyond everything. Because to create such a yesh, you have to have Atzmus. Whereas Yichudei law, though you don't see it, so the paradox here is that which we see and cannot comprehend is revealing to us now Koyach Atzmus, Ein Sof, and that which we don't see and we can only understand the concept, like Shmiyah, there it's only Giluyim. So if that's the case, so why are we pushing to have Riyah and Yichudei law? It's much better to have Riyah in Atzmus Ein Sof. We see the power of Atzmus in this existence. So he said, no, remember what we learned, that the Eir HaBli has a mile over the Eir HaGvul. The Eir HaGvul has the mile that is taka entering and creating existence. But the Eir HaBli, he says, the advantage of that is that you have a Riyah in divine energy, in pure divinity. Not in Atzmus, but in how Atzmus manifests. As pure divinity, not as it relates to existence. So Atzmus is obviously beyond Ein Sof that is beyond existence, but there it's manifesting in existence. When you want to have a pure experience of the divine, we learned about the expansiveness of Elikus. It's pure form of Lifnei Tzimtzum. That is an Ein Sof, and now we're going to explain that we could have a Riyah there too. And the quality of that is Giluyim. That's exactly its mile. It's Giluyim. We need Giluyim. Atzmus doesn't need Giluyim. That's why you can create something that has no Gilui. But Giluyim for us has a great advantage. It shows we experience it. And as I said before, the Koyach Atzmus in this world is manifest here, but we don't experience it. We could see it, but if we say we see its mitzias, we see it exist, but we don't see and understand its personality. Whereas Ein Sof, because it's Giluyim, and we like bask in it, and we can then experience Elikus in a way that's a Gilui, a revealed divine, that has a quality in it that helps us experience Elikus in a pure form. That's why you need Etzem and Giluyim. So now we're talking about how we're going to have Riyah also in Giluyim, not just the Etzem as we see it through creation.
So the bottom line for
That's
us,
the
the
parenthesis.
Giluyim are reaching us deeper than the Riyah.
Now it continues.
Simon, could you hear me? The bottom line is that the Giluyim is reaching deeper in us than Riyah Atzmus.
Okay.
Can hear me.
Now he qualifies that though we say now that we're going to have Riyah, a form of Riyah, in Ein Sof, the Yichudei law, that's higher, that is beyond, not through existence, and that's beyond existence. He says, "V'loi b'bchinas Riyah Gashmis." But this is not a Riyah Gashmis. This is not in a state of physical sight.
Rabbi Techtel's trying.
In other words, when we look at the world, we see a physical world, and we see the creative force that's behind it. Now, it's not Riyah Gashmis. It's not physical sight. Ki'im. So what is it?
There
Why are we
is
calling
a
it
very
Riyah?
big mila.
This is Al Derech Mashal Kosa B'Rayim Mehemna. All this from the Tzemach Tzedek. Like it says in Ayin Mehemna in Zohar, B'Ayin HaSeichel, with the eye of the mind. So clearly, he's talking earlier not about the eye of the mind. Even though some Maimorim may speak that way, here he says clearly that this is now the Ayin HaSeichel. The Beliba is Chazer Kula. So the expression is there is that in his heart he sees everything. But it's in your heart. It's your heart seeing it, not physical sight. Like he says in Tanya, Ulahoyer Enov B'Riyah Chushis V'Loi B'Bchinas Shmiya V'Avona Levad. To illuminate his eyes in a tangible sight, vision, not just hearing and understanding alone. But that's still not physical. He doesn't say, he says Riyah Mukshis, he doesn't say Riyah Gashmis. It's like you actually tangibly can see it, like, but with your eyes of your mind, or like he says, you see, the heart sees everything. Now, where's this Tanya? The truth is, it's also Tzemach Tzedek brings this too. That, by the way, the Tzemach Tzedek actually asks Chaz v'Shalom, adds, he says, Lo Riyah Gashmis Chaz v'Shalom. Not, God forbid, a physical sight in Yichudei law. Rebbe Rashab remove the Chaz v'Shalom. Yeah, Al Derech Mashkot B'Rayim Mehemna Be'ein HaSeichel the Belibi is Chazer Kula K'mo Shekosek Gam Ken B'Tanya. Which Tanya is it? Anybody know? Which Tanya? Yeah, Hushis. Okay, I'll look it up. Okay. So now we have here three levels. We have Shmiya v'Havana Levad. Someone hears about it and understands. You have Riyah chushis, but not gashmis. Envisioning it with your eyes, the eye of the mind envisions, the heart sees it, senses it. And then you have riyah basar mamish, eine basar mamish, you physically see it with your physical eyes. This is what he discussed earlier. And now he's saying that we're going to have a riyah, not just a shmiyah in Yechudi law. V'hainu, which this means, shechochma hi bechinas riyah. Chochma is the level of riyah. Till now, he hasn't mentioned that in this concept, in this context. Samach Tzaddik did. Chochma is the level of riyah. Bina ubina b'chinas shmiyah, and bina is the level of hearing. Okay. Now this is going to become this is a longer subject that's going to go a good 2 pages. It's not a few lines, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're all up to speed here. So I'm stopping again if anybody wants to ask anything or clarify anything, because this needs to be, you have to go very meticulous, step by step here to appreciate this whole subject. Anybody want to comment or ask? Okay.
So here is.
He continues. Again, all this Tzemach Tzedekk's mimer. Later I'll point out what the Rebbe Rashab adds. As we see,
Simon, could you hear me?
Yesh Hefresh Godel, there's a very big difference.
Hear me?
By someone who conceived of an idea, of a new idea. To someone else, the difference between he who conceived of a new idea to someone else who hears the idea from him. So let's say I conceive of a new idea and I share it with you. These are the two, this is the distinction he's making between the big difference between the one who conceived of a new idea and someone else who's hearing about it from him. So one is Riyah and one is Shmiyah. He's going to explain. Just want to see the language of Tzemach Tzedek. Pirish al derech mashal. Adam shenefel le'askolach losh mekech ha'sechel. In the Rebbe Riyah. Hashem ech acher sheshemei askolach. Okay, yeah. Same idea here. What's the difference? So he says, the one who conceived of the idea, by him radiates a very intense. Rav is not just kamos. Rav means a great light, great energy, abundance of oir by the person who conceived it. And the clarity of the idea by him is as if he's seeing it with his eyes. It doesn't say eyes, as if he's seeing it. In other words, it's so clear, it's clear to him, it's clarity. That's what he calls Riyah now. Because he conceived it, so it's abundance of light of the idea is very clear and radiates in him a clear way, as if he sees the idea that he's conceived. Mashenkein, by contrast, Gabei ha'achar, from the perspective of the other who heard it from him, hu b'chinas shmiya levad. He experiences only as something he's listening to. It's like a more of a, it's a what's the word I want to say? A bounce. It's like a klesheni, like a reflection. He doesn't say that word, but he says it's only in form of hearing. He hears the idea, so it doesn't have that clarity. Because now another example in the individual himself, who conceived of the idea, the difference when he conceived it and as time passes. The gamba misha hiskala inyan, and even by the and also by the person who conceived of the idea. Achazman, after time passes, after a lapse of time, gamkin haskola etzlei rak b'chinas shmiya levad. By him too, the idea will only be in a form of like listening. In other words, it's moved more distant from him. It's not as clear and sharp and focused as it was when he actually conceived of the idea. So time has its effect. Memory. But at the time when the conception, when the idea came to him, from the source of intelligence, from the collective unconsciousness, from the makar haseichel, from wherever the idea came from, its source, harihoya etzlei k'moi b'bchinas riyah, or harihu etzlei. It's by him like a level of vision. So he's explaining that in seichel itself, which is not einei basar. We're not talking now about seeing something physically. In seichel, there's two levels of understanding something, of clarity. There's the clarity by the person who conceives of an idea in contrast to one who hears about it, and the clarity of that very person who conceives it to when time passes, and then it's not as clear and as sharp as it was initially. Initially, it's in a form of riyah, and later in a form of shmiyah. So he's explaining riyah and shmiyah now in seichel, essentially in the context of clarity. Okay, I pause again. Anybody, any question? Now he qualifies. The im hayes shuzeh yudia sichlis. Because you could ask a question now. 1 second, we're talking about seichel here. We're not talking about you see it or you don't see it. Here, either I see the table or I don't see the table. So I see it. If I don't see it, I know about it. Someone tells me about it. What do we have here? In seichel itself, in yediyah, seem two levels. So he's going to explain that seichel has more than seichel to it. It's not just about the understanding of something. There's also its resonating truths. So he's going to talk about something we learned a lot about in volume 1. So before we continue, let me just say a few introductory words. Most of us, when we think about seichel, intelligence, we see it as a structured, systemized organism, basically, within us. Just like we have our emotional spectrum, how we feel about things and how we are attracted or repelled, and our emotional reactions. So we have another part of us, tool that we were given, called intelligence, seichel. What does seichel do? Seichel observes, it studies, it evaluates, it collects information, it analyzes, diagnoses, a whole bunch of things, and ultimately comes to you with a conclusion, or at least with a summation. Here's what I discovered. It's like a lot of research the mind does. Similar to a computer, you put in data, it processes it all. Yes, it absorbs and processes. And then it comes away and says, here are what I've learned. This is what I've learned. We're talking about, of course, a healthy process, not biased or prejudiced mind, but a healthy mind at work, objectively looking into something. What they call discovery, research. Not even getting now how it impacts emotions. It's not relevant to our discussion. So basically, seichel is a system. It's a systemized way that the brain naturally has ability to process. But there's another thing about seichel, which is less talked about, but even more important. What is the purpose of it all? So if you separate seichel, that unfortunately, during the last few hundred years, science and enlightenment, so to speak, turned seichel into its own entity. But if you really think about it, the purpose of seichel is to give person clarity. It's not just to analyze things, not just a mathematical equation or a chess game or a mind game. It's to provide clarity. And even more importantly, to find the truth. So in seichel, you can have, there's two parts. There's the seichel process of how do I find the truth? And then there's a point where you come to and you recognize, and it resonates, a truth resonates. A clarity about things resonates. Is this purely seichel? Is it purely the dynamics of logical calculations and logical rules, the rules of logic? We know many people who understand, who have brilliant minds and are geniuses, and they frankly have no clarity about most of life. Because they're brilliant minds, like a computer. A computer has a lot of information, and it's all facts, and give you accurate information, but it's clueless about life. Ask a computer, what should I do when my spouse is angry at me? So yes, it could spit out a bunch of answers that has been accumulated, but it doesn't have the concept of something that's a little more than just pure logical calculations. I'm not talking about now intuition or emotions. I'm talking about the purpose of seichel, to get to a point of total clarity and resonance. To put it in more Chassidus, I would say the following: that seichel is not about you. It's about the thing that you want to understand. It's not that I understand it. It's that the truth has emerged. And we're going to learn, and I'll elaborate, how Chochmah and Bina are very much part of this process, where Chochmah is far more connected to the resonating truths and clarity of an idea, and Bina is more the technical and mechanics of understanding an idea. So like Bina, you could say, I understand. And Chochmah will say, the idea is understood. The I won't be there. Or as I heard from one of my mashpiyim, he said that Bina, the mensch, nemt versteht den Inyan. The mensch nemt den Inyan. The person grasps the idea. And the Chochmah, the Inyan nemt the mensch. The idea grasps the person. Friedrich Rebbe has an expression in L'Kutei Diburim, I believe, that there's a person is learning Torah, and there's a person that Torah is learning him, teaching him. So there's the you in the first step. I am here and I'm learning Torah, and I'm going to learn it sincerely and purely and try to understand it and try to assimilate it in my life. But it's an I, there's an object and there's a subject. And there's the other person who completely nullifies himself. And he just becomes, letting me absorb Torah. Torah is teaching him. He's essentially an extension of, and a channel of Torah. It's a far different level. So what we know from this, therefore, that seichel is much more than just understanding something. That's why you have people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. People who are, as I said, brilliant geniuses, but they don't have any clue about what life really is like. We say, Ein chochem kabal nesoyin. There's no wise one except the one with experience. What does experience add? It doesn't make the equation differently. 2 + 2 = 4, whether you have experience or no experience. But it adds a dimension to the truths and the realities and the clarities that seichel provide. In the context of Avodas Hashem, it comes down to this. Seichel is a gift given to us to be able to envision a reality beyond ourselves. If we were just emotional creatures, all we'd have is what's in it for me. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. And any seichel would be called seichel hanikna, which is the seichel that's used to express an animal seichel, is only used to be ingenious in how you hunt, in how you protect, in how you breed, and how you survive. It does not have the capacity of su morim einechem v'r'umi bora'ela. That's why animals don't look up to heaven. Friedrich Rebbe says an animal only has never seen heaven. It's physiological makeup because an animal is here to function. It's part of existence. It's not here to dream and imagine of a reality beyond itself. It's not the role of an animal. A human being walks upright because we have a neshama, a divine neshama, not just a divine energy that every creature has. And we are aware of something beyond us. We seek transcendence. We look up. And as we look up, we want to know what's out there. And when we get the restlessness that animals don't have, the animal bliss they have, we have the restlessness, the chelasava even, that we want to, what is going on beyond us? And we want to connect to it. We want to find out. And if you're really experiencing it deeply, you literally you ache for it, as we've been learning. So now he's going to go into discussing what Riyah and Shmiya is in this context. That it's not just about understanding godliness. It's about relating to a reality that's beyond us, and only the mind can do that. Emotions always ask how I am experiencing it. And the mind can dream about things that we haven't even begun to experience. The mind can fantasize, it can imagine, it can dream, it can learn about things that are lifnei tzimtzum. The emotions can't go there because emotions have to experience. You can't experience lifnei tzimtzum because it doesn't allow for existence to be if it's in its full glory. But our minds, why not? Our minds can go to places that we're not yet there. And they help open up the door between the Ein Sof and us. So the Moichin, essentially, specifically Chochmah, is the bridge between the superconscious and beyond into the consciousness. And that will then travel to Bina, which will turn it into a full-blown way that internalizes it within us. Because remember, the resonance and the truth of it may not be internalized. We also need to bring it into our terms. In a way, Chochmah is Ayin and Bina is sometimes Yesh. Or Chochmah is Ayin of Yesh, of the Yesh Amiti, and Bina is the Ayin of the Yesh Hanivra. Different ways to explain it. And that's what we're going to be learning. We're going to stop here, but we're going to be learning now how Chochmah and Bina work with each other, Riyah and Shmiya, and therefore from there we'll understand that even Yichudei Law, you can have a resonating element. Not Riyah's Basar, he said, not like Yichudei Tato, where you can actually see existence and from there see the divine power, but even Yichudei Law, even though it's levels beyond us, we can have the Einei HaSeichel, a truth that resonates, that would be like the level of Riyah, like Riyah, with the Seichel, like he said. And then there's the lower level of Shmiya. And we're going to be discussing the distinction. That's where he's going to. And that, of course, is going to help us understand better how we then ache and long, and then how we ultimately quench the thirst and the hunger of the Chelas Ava that we are addressing here. Okay. So I'm going to stop here right now, right after the line. Right before the line, the Ima Yeshuzeh Yudiyah Sichlius. Because he's going to now discuss what the Seichel itself, what Seichel really is about. So before we sign off, anybody want to ask anything?
7.
I'll continue learning this tomorrow.
It's interesting in the Eira Teiro. In the
You
Eira
guys are very
Teiro,
quiet today.
from the Tzemach Tzedek, he's bringing about Chayla Savo, that this is only in Tfilis the Choil, that Shabbos you could quench the Chuko from the Chayla Savo.
Rabbi,
You know something, by the way, before my computer was was on silence. I had no volume.
Thank
So
you
if
very
anybody
much.
spoke in the last hour, I was wondering why nobody speaks up, but now I realized there was no sound here.
You made me
So
feel
you heard
a little better because I
No.
felt
So
no.
I know you guys may have said something and I ignored it, but I didn't hear it.
Okay.
So say it now. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's just an interesting point but it's a Tzedek in the Eira Teiro, he brings about Tfilas Avo, that this is only in Tfilas the Chol. Tfilas the Shabbos, you could quench the love of Tfilas Avo. It's interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of things. Look, there's a whole sugi here. I don't want to really come to any conclusions till we finish, and then we'll go back and we'll try to. Yeah, that's correct. Look, Chelas Ava will be resolved completely. Milasid love it. But today's through Torah Mitzvahs, we're going to discuss it. Right now, he's
talking about it, that it's not like La'asid Lavoy, but
Right. I don't know if he mentions Shabbos later here. He may even mention it, if I recall. Maybe not. Anyway, did I miss anything that you guys did comment or a question? If please say it now, because I really didn't hear it till the second. I realized that that's so quiet.
putting a smile on my face.
Why?
I was very disturbed. I said few times things and I was purely ignored.
Chas v'shalom. No. I may I may tell you, let's wait till later, but I don't ignore, for sure not. I would never ignore. And I apologize. Were you the only one that spoke up? Did anyone else say anything? Is Eliezer here, by the way? I know I spoke about him earlier. Okay. Are there any other questions, Rav Shlomo, that you brought up that I should? What?
That's okay. It's okay.
Rabbi Eliezer was here, but I don't think he's here anymore.
I'm sorry?
I said Eliezer was here, but I don't think he's here anymore.
Oh. Okay, I wanted to know because. Okay, I feel a little. Okay, it's awkward a bit. Rav Shlomo, any other questions or any points you made that you want to bring up again that I just didn't hear?
You explain it very well. It's interesting, the shift that's going from the Yaseni Basel to the Bein HaSefer.
Yeah, it's clear. He says it's clear. It's as clear as day that he's saying that here. But I think once you learn it, you understand what he means. With Riyas Ein HaSeichel, you don't have anything to look at. It's only in your mind. Because we don't see the spheres of Atzilus. We don't see Eir Ein Sof. Here, at least, we have, like I said, a light bulb. We had a physical world that's...
It's like you said, you need also the Giluim. You need them, because otherwise the Riyas Atzmos from down here, it's, you don't know what you see.
Correct. Oh, Eliezer just wrote to me that obviously we can't hear. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay. Anyone who want to bring anything else up?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson. Everyone have a good day.
You too. Thank
Okay,
you.
I am going to, let's sign off. I want to thank Matis, who's been helping me with the computer.